I want to begin by telling you a story about a friend of mine named Liz. The story takes place in the early 1980s in the horse country of Corona, California. Liz was 21 years old. She had 2 young children. Her son Michael was almost 3 years old, and she had a newborn daughter. And they'd moved out to Corona because they wanted to be closer to her husband's family. And when they got there, they moved into this little shack on this very massive property because it was all they could afford. And right near this shack was an abandoned guest house. And outside of this guest house was a cement pond. And it was kind of shaped like a bowl. Well, one day, she and her family and friends, they decided that they were going to clean this pond out to be able to swim inside of it. And when they were doing it, all the little kids who lived on the property, they were riding their big wheels kind of up and down the cement sides of the pond. And this is the day that Michael, her son, became very infatuated with the pond. He was always wandering over to it, so they'd have to watch him and make sure he was okay. Well, one day, Liz's husband decides that he wants to get a new car. So they drop off the kids at a family friend's house. And they go out and they say it's going to take a couple hours and then we'll be back home. But a couple of hours turns into all day. And by the time they get back, Liz's daughter, she really needs to nurse. So she sits down and she's feeding her daughter and she says, "Hey, can you just watch Michael? He's been cooped up all day." So Michael was kind of playing around outside, but her husband decides he wants to call his friends and family and tell them about this new car that he's bought. So he's talking on the phone and he's kind of looking out the window at the same time. And Liz says, "Can you see Michael? Is he okay?" And he's like, yeah, no, he's fine. I can see him. He's right there. And then a few minutes go by and she noticed that her husband is kind of distracted. And she asks him again, she says, "Hey, can you see Michael? Is he out there?" And he looks and Michael's gone. And so she says, "Well, go look for him, go find him." So he hangs up the phone, he goes out, he starts looking, and when her husband doesn't come back in a few minutes, she decides, you know what, I need to go out. So she puts down her baby and then she ends up going directly out to the pond because that's what her intuition tells her. That's where he's gonna be. So she gets there and he's nowhere to be seen. And then she goes over to the ledge and she looks down and there he is at the bottom of the pond. And so she jumps in, she goes down, she grabs him, pulls him back up, gets him to the surface, and she starts screaming for her husband to come over. And he comes over and they're able to get him out of the pond. And there's a teenager who lives on the property and he makes his way down and he starts doing CPR on Michael immediately. And they call an ambulance, but the ambulance isn't coming because they're in the middle of nowhere. So they decide to throw Michael into the back of this truck and they drive him to the hospital. And this teenager is doing CPR on him the whole way there for an hour and a half. And when they get to the hospital, the doctors, they take him in and they put him into a chemical-induced coma and they say, "You know what? We don't know if Michael's gonna make it or not." Well, amazingly, Michael survives. And yes, he has some brain damage, but thanks to the tireless efforts of Liz, working with him, rehabilitating his motor skills and his speech, he actually is relatively normal given everything that happened to him. Now, when I talk to Liz about this day, what she often tells me is that her biggest regret is that she didn't trust her intuition, that she couldn't rely upon her husband to watch Michael. If she could go back in time, what she would do is the moment he got on the phone, she would just pick up her daughter, go outside and watch him herself. And today, some 40 years after this accident, Michael, who doesn't fully understand the circumstances surrounding that day, he blames Liz, his mother, for this accident, when in reality, she is the one who saved him. And so what I want to talk about today is the concept of regret, how the action or inaction of a single moment can plague us for the rest of our lives. We're going to talk about when regret is good for us, when it's bad, and how regret shapes our lives. And to begin this, I want to introduce you to somebody who spends a lot of time talking to people who struggle with regret. Will you join me in the kitchen? I want to welcome Lisa Pisha to the show. Welcome to Kokoro.
Thank you for having me.
So whenever we do this segment, I always start off with a meal. And the meal usually has something to do with the segment. And we're talking about regret today. And whenever I feel regret, I always want to eat comfort food. And for me, the biggest comfort food is definitely burgers. So I made a recipe that I love, which is a barbecue cheddar burger. And I want to give it a shot, and then we'll jump into regret. How does that feel?
It feels great. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right.
I've never had barbecue sauce on a burger before.
Really? This is the first time?
This is the first.
How's that taste?
It tastes amazing.
Is it okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you? What do you
Sure.
do? Kind of give us some background.
I am a marriage and family therapist and a relationship coach. I've been working with individuals and couples for about 20 years in the space of private practice. My focus of the work that I do is really about taking people through all of the limiting beliefs that they have about themselves. The goal is essentially to be able to go into a partnership or live into a partnership with the best part of yourself and consciously becoming very aware of what that feels like and looks like in partnership all the time.
So we're here to talk today about regret.
It's a big
And
topic.
I am sure you deal with a lot of people who feel regret in their life. So why don't we start by kind of talking about the different types of regret that people feel? Maybe you can walk us through a few of those.
There's a lot of different types of regret that people feel. I think primarily the kind of regret I see falls into one of two categories. A circumstance in which a choice was made and they regret making that decision. And it was a moment in time. So an experience was not had or was had based on a choice that was made. The deeper regret to that happens when it is in a circumstance of loss or morality. I did something and it's now deeply sitting inside of me and I have to reckon with that, right? So there's like circumstantial regret. You know, maybe I went to Paris and I didn't get a chance to see the Eiffel Tower, and that's a bummer, and I regret not having enough time to do that. The regret that I see a lot in my office mostly has to deal with situations in which a choice was made at a point in time and it impacted the trajectory of a relationship, even if it's just the relationship somebody had with themselves. And with that comes loss. And in that space, there's a lot of reckoning that has to occur. And so again, it's about pausing, but not staying there. We don't sit there for very, 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 very long, right? Because chances are you're already sitting there and you didn't come to me to sit. You came to me to process. You came to me to move forward, to do something, to relieve something of some kind, right? And regret keeps us stuck in space and time. Now, that's not to say it shouldn't. It should. It's a place where we take pause, but that's not where we set up camp. We're not living there. It's about honoring the space of both people. So allowing for time and healing to happen and voices to be heard and the story to be told for everybody involved as best as possible.
How do you convey the idea to your clients that, you know, you can apologize, but this person doesn't necessarily have to accept your apology, and they may not ever be ready to accept your apology? How do you deal with that kind of dynamic?
I try to talk about it in the space of moving from regret to remorse. You can be regretful, but that doesn't help anybody and it doesn't help you. But it's being able to look at the person, me being able to look at you and say, I want to apologize. I'm sitting in this space with you. I hear you. I'm validating you over and over again. I will sit here as long as you need me to. But also knowing that in the space of sitting with you, I'm adding my own forgiveness to myself of the decision that I made for where I was at when I made it. And I wouldn't do that again because I know better, and knowing better helps me do better, right? And so there's a piece of this that's very self-forgiving as well. Right? And the allowance of that forgiveness to yourself is, even if you don't forgive me, I have to find it within myself because I can't sit here. I'm not going to grow from here. I'm going to be stuck here.
It doesn't change the fact that you did the thing.
Right.
It doesn't erase
anything.
But what it does do is it gives you permission, in a sense, to forgive yourself so that you can move forward and hopefully not make that same decision again, that you can learn and say, okay, I really made this mistake. I understand it. And I'm going to change so that it doesn't happen next time. What do you think is needed inside of somebody? Because there's some people who don't learn. Some people, they just keep making the same mistakes over and over again.
Right.
The regret is not teaching them. Is there a factor inside of people who you meet who you say, oh, this is a person who's going to learn, they're going to move forward, they're going to be able to figure out and do better next time? Yeah. What do you see as being kind of part of the qualities and characteristics?
I love that question so much, because there is a difference, right, in the people that can move forward with it and the people that will make the same mistake over and over again. I think it's two things. I think it's the ability to be self-reflective, but the other thing is empathy. I have to be able to have perspective on what that experience was like, down to its fullest, down to like the senses inside myself of what it would feel like to be in your position, right? In order to be able to move from there. I need to shift my frame of reference to not be looking at what I see. I have to be able to look at it from your point of view in an almost finite detail as best as I can get it, right? So I need you to tell me what that experience was like for you, so I can see and I can feel it in all the parts of myself in order to shift my perspective and have true connected empathy with you.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate you sharing all your wisdom. I so respect what you do with couples, the way that you're able to help them heal. And I hope that you continue to have the opportunity to share that wisdom with so many other people, because people need that so much today, what you're offering.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
I often think of regret as a spectrum. And at one end of the spectrum are little things that I regret. So maybe I said something inappropriate, I feel embarrassed about it, or I spent too much time scrolling on my phone, or I ate too much of a food that I like and now I feel sick. So these are not huge deals, and I end up regretting those for a short period of time, but pretty quickly I can recover and move on. In the middle of the spectrum are regrets with bigger consequences. So maybe I didn't spend enough time with someone who I loved and they're no longer here, or maybe I missed out on a financial opportunity. Now these regrets, they're much harder to swallow, because ultimately when you make those mistakes over and over again, they can add up to real loss over time. And so when I find myself having those types of regrets, I try to learn from them so I don't do them again. At the other end of the spectrum are big regrets. These are things that if you could get in a time machine and go back in time to change it, you absolutely would. One of my biggest regrets actually happened when my sons were little. We decided that we were going to take a trip out to see my in-laws who live in California. But because we live in Chicago, that requires a 5-hour plane flight. But because of my wife's work schedule, she couldn't come out with me. So I was gonna have to take the boys out on my own. And I don't know if you have in-laws, but mine are pretty particular about how they like their house, what you can and can't do. So by the end of the week, I was ready to leave. And again, I had to take the boys home on my own because of my wife's work schedule. We get on the flight, there's a lot of logistics involved in getting them all the way back to Chicago, but we do it, and I was really proud of myself. I didn't lose my cool the entire time. I get them home, we go to bed. Now what I didn't realize was just how exhausted I was from this entire trip. And so the next morning I get up late, and we have an appointment we need to get to. And if you've had little kids, you know that when you wake up late, nothing is going to go smoothly. And that's exactly what happened. And so I got them like 90% of the way there, and I was like, look, can you guys put your socks and shoes on? I'd really appreciate that. I leave for a few minutes, I come back, and they've done nothing. No socks, no shoes, like they've just been playing. Now, I shouldn't have had such high expectations. I mean, they are 4 and 6 at this point. But because I was exhausted, I lost my cool. I said, look, I'm gonna go out to the car, I'll meet you all out there, and you need to be there in 2 minutes, otherwise I'm leaving. Now, of course, this is a bit of an empty threat because we're going to an appointment for them. I'm not gonna leave them. So I go out to the car and I wait. 2 minutes elapses, so I pull out of my driveway and I drive down the street and I turn around and I come back. I was gone for probably all of 20 seconds. But when I pulled into the driveway and I could see my youngest son in the glass door and there were just tears streaming down his face. And I knew in that moment I had made a huge mistake. Now today, my sons are teenagers and they still talk about this moment. Unfortunately, I think it's one of their first core memories. And it impacted my youngest son the most because he will always ask me when I'm leaving, he'll say, "Dad, where are you going? When are you coming back?" I think that this event instilled in him a deep fear that one day I might leave and never return. Now, in case you're wondering, I have apologized to my sons for what I did and told them how much I regret it. And for their part, they've forgiven me for it. They're like, "Dad, it's water under the bridge. No big deal." But if I could go back in time and talk to myself about how those 20 seconds would impact my sons, I absolutely would. Now, not everybody has the opportunity to be able to talk to the people who they've hurt about their regrets. In fact, one of those people is my friend Liz, who I talked about at the beginning of this episode. She's never had the opportunity to speak about her regrets to her son. And so how I thought we would end our episode today is by giving her that opportunity that she's never had before.
All right.
All right, you just start when you're ready.
All right. Dear Michael, I want you to know that I love you and I will always love you. If I could go back in time and change what happened that day so many years ago, I would do it in a heartbeat. I did everything I could to give you the best life after your accident. And that is why it breaks my heart to know that I have hurt you. I know you feel that I have treated you unfairly, but please know that I do believe in you and that I believe you are a very intelligent man. It pains me that you have cut yourself off from me, and I have wanted to talk to you face to face and have asked you several times, but you have told me that you are not ready. I've been waiting for you to let me know when you are ready to talk, as you said you would, but after 15 years, it still hasn't happened. When we have seen each other at family get-togethers, you refuse to talk to me, so I don't push out of respect for you. If you think that's easy for me to do, it is not. I miss you very much, and more than anything, I wish we could work things out. There are many things I would like to say to you, but with the distance between us, I will continue to wait until you are ready. I forgive you for the many hurtful things you have said to me over the years, and I hope that someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me. But even if you don't, my love for you will never waver, and I will always be waiting for you with open arms. Okay. Sheesh.